All right, let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining. On today's webinar, we want to specifically talk about delivering amazing customer experiences using a specific kind of strategy that we call build plus buy. We'll talk a little bit about how that decision and strategy influences what kind of customer experience we provide to our customers and how we deliver services in a way that delights customers. So that's the key discussion topic for today. For today, we have two of us will be hosting today's webinar. We have Bill Klein, who's the co-founder and president of Consero. Bill, you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
And I'm the managing partner at ThinkBridge, right? So I think both of us have a background as entrepreneurs, being in technology, having worked with growth stage companies, having implemented technologies, having built companies and services specifically tailored for the mid-market. So we thought bringing all those experiences together and addressing this specific topic will be useful for everyone, especially to understand how in the changing landscape with so many SaaS products out there, how do we actually deliver a unified and a consistent user experience and customer experience. So moving on, the question we are going to answer today is, how do we keep up with the numerous software platforms that are out there that is required to run a typical business, yet provide amazing customer experience and employee experience, right? So the landscape for SaaS products out there continues to grow. There's new creative entrepreneurs who are coming up with new products every day. Those products tackle and address very specific niche problem statements, which essentially means that you'll have a lot of problem statements that are addressed through a variety of software as a service solutions out there. Add to that all the other systems of record that you need, the existing systems that you may already have. Looking at these types of the technology landscape of a typical business is getting more and more complex. Everyone talks about the cloud. Today, it's so easy to sign up for a service, right? So you would go online, click, 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 put your credit card in, and boom, you have a new software, a new capability that you just added for your business. And then that ease of purchasing software and the ease of not having to deploy and build and have an infrastructure behind it, just clicking and buying like a utility, has also brought along with it other problems, which complicates how you would manage and run your business, right? So you typically when you start your business, you have one or two products. At the end of it, you end up with 20, 30, 40, 50 products in the landscape that both employees as well as customers struggle with. So that's the problem that we are trying to address here. And we want to go through specific examples of how we've solved that problem through a particular strategy, which we call the build plus buy or the unification strategy. So that's the topic for today's discussion. Bill, would you like to add anything?
No, I think this sums it up pretty well on. And I would, the only thing I'd say is, it's even probably can be even more overwhelming than what even the slide shows. When I think about finance, just within finance, I could divide it into, 6 categories of products. Each of those categories has several players. And so, there's where do you end up, and you have a couple of things out of each of these categories that support your business, but just the choosing them and finding one that's going to be a fit for a business, if really the right level of thought is going into it, there's a lot to digest and to put together.
So going right into what Bill talked about is the number of options out there is literally overwhelming, right? It could be that either people know that there's a lot of products out there, or they just know the 2 products that everyone talks about, right? But this is the whole idea of fallacy of choice. We have way too many products out there or softwares out there that we think will work for us, and we don't know until we've tried it, gone too deep into it, figured out it doesn't work. And then switching platforms is another big problem. So if you look at the current landscape, it looks like that, right? That's just what Bill talked about, which is extremely confusing. There's quite a bit of stuff out there. On one side, you might think, if I don't use one of these new and upcoming products out there, I might be missing out, and my competition may be using that and getting better at their business while I'm not. And based on what I know, talking to several businesses, they all struggle with this. They've already implemented something, and then along comes another new platform that has this tremendous investor base, and they've just raised a big round and they come up with these amazing products, and you feel that'll work better for you, right? At the same time, it's very hard to decipher between what the sales team is telling you, what the marketing is telling you, what the media and internet is telling you, and there's a lot of decisions to be made. So our goal today is to sort of lay out this problem statement, and we will not address how you pick what product works for you, but we'll address it. We sort of will indirectly address how you can solve for it by looking at specific services out there that use these products, that have already gone through the process of vetting these products and have identified or continue to identify the best of the products that will help businesses. So you don't have to, as business leaders, as owners, you don't have to go through all the process to understand and do that. Instead, you can focus on running your business and making your business better and do what you're good at. Okay. All right. So that's what we are dealing with. And so as a result of this type of a landscape, right? So if you look at having this many systems that are available at your disposal, on one end, it is great that you have choice. But on the other hand, it makes it even more complicated because now you have to decide, and then you have the issue of FOMO, or fear of missing out, that you might not know whether you made the right decision, and then you keep second guessing yourself. Now, if you look at a typical growth stage business with about 50 employees, they use an average of 24 different SaaS products inside their business, right? Whether you realize it or not, using OneDrive or Dropbox or Box, it is a SaaS product. It's a yet another product in your landscape that you signed up using click with a credit card. Like that, you have so many of these products that you signed up. And one good example that I can think about today is 3 years ago or 4 years ago, you had one Netflix. Great, easy, click Netflix, you signed up for it. Today, I got 12 or I don't know how many services are out there. And you always need every one, a little show or one show on every platform that makes you sign up for that service, right? And that's what happens with the SaaS landscape, where you have your business that, you differentiate your business through your business model, your products you offer, and the customer experience. And oh, by the way, I need all these other systems to make my business work. I need documents, I need infrastructure, I need BI, I need communication. And just when you think that's all I need, oh, by the way, I need marketing, I need sales, I need customer relations, CRM platform. And then now you start seeing overlap of all these products, right? So some sales products like Salesforce are transforming into a development platform where you can add more features. So now you have the added choice of actually enhancing Salesforce to make it work like the way you want it to work, right? So similarly, as you're rolling out Salesforce and building out your team, by the way, I need all these other things that are out there, which is my financial management tools, my HR tools, my payroll tools, so the list keeps going. And I think you all get the idea that typically you end up with about 20 to 25 different platforms that you have to use for the little feature that they offer. And despite all of that, despite all of these awesome SaaS platforms, there's the ubiquitous Excel spreadsheet, right? In the end, if I look at different businesses, they have this one spreadsheet that becomes the master for everything just because they can't get the information they need from all of it, right? And then, yeah, you have signed up for all of these. You have those, how many other apps you have on your phone that you need to use, on your tablet, on your watch. And then there's that critical spreadsheet that without which all of the data and things that you do here don't make any sense, right? And there's this one person or two people who hold more tacit knowledge about the business and the customers in their own heads. So again, the problem statement that I'm trying to reinforce here is you're dealing with a lot of software, all great best-in-class systems that have been designed to solve specific problems for your business, right? And then you still continue to find gaps and issues that slows down your business or causes friction in your customer experience or your employee experience, right? So I'm just setting the stage for that to go into the solution in a couple of slides here. Bill, anything to add here? I know you've seen many of these use cases.
Yeah, I think this does sum it up pretty well. And I think it's the inevitable path, right? Like you start off, as you said, on, and like probably more of your stuff is in Excel and it's done manually. And then as you're growing from, you have there 50 employees, as you're growing from, 1 to 50 employees, you start to put these tools in place because you're solving point problems, right? Hey, we need something to help us do this better. And you put these things in, and there is a boost. It's better than doing it the way you did before. But then you get to this critical point where now all of a sudden you have all these point solutions, but what's the overarching strategy and plan over the long run? And I think you get to that inflection point, and there's almost no avoiding it, because I think it's hard to have the plan when you're formulating what you're going to need, and your business is going to do some pivots and changes. But at some point you get to, hold on, operationally, now we know we've been working for a while with customers and supporting the business. And now you kind of got to start thinking about a more cohesive plan. What are we doing with all of these things? We can't just keep adding them, and they're maybe not incrementally really fixing things. So how do they work together, and how do you solve the overarching problem, so you have a plan for what the next thing you get is, or what thing you could replace because there's some redundant functionality. And I think there's that inflection point that's inevitable, but you have to go through that at some point in your growth.
Right. And so again, there's this notion of vendor lock-in, and you've already used one portion of a software in this landscape for a while. And then now you need to, you have this new piece of, SaaS product that was just released, and moving from one to another is also a project in and of itself. That again, it deprioritizes what's important and puts these little operational things in place, which takes away time from working on your differentiators and things that help your customers. Okay. So moving on, just looking at how similar to my example of Netflix, we'll apply that example to the systems that existed a few years ago to how it looks today, right? If you look at the past a few years ago, we had these big systems of record, which claimed to be, hey, I'm a one-stop shop. I have every feature in the market that you need to run your business. It's configurable. You can flex it to any way you want. And it supports your end-to-end workflow. So your opportunity to order all the way to your record to report, right? So these platforms obviously could only be afforded by large businesses that costed millions and millions of dollars. You had to go through 3, 5, 10, some even 20-year implementation timelines to roll it out in your businesses. So it scaled up, but it never scaled down to the growth stage of small and medium businesses. And it's really hard to do it simply because these are what they call by the book systems, meaning they have defined what the best practices are. And they say it embeds all of that into the system. So just by virtue of using the system, you are using best practices. But then now how do you start differentiating yourself, right? If 5 businesses buys SAP and implements it the same way, are they all the same business? Is there no differentiation? So those were the sort of tensions that were discussed back and forth as these systems of records were being implemented, right? Now, moving along, today, what is happening is the same features, one or half a module of SAP is its own SaaS product with they've expanded that functionality to suit multiple industries, multiple markets, multiple use cases, and they've built their own SaaS platform. And there are, individual SaaS platforms that are valued at billions of dollars that only address a specific portion of what SAP, Oracle, or any of these other systems addressed in the past, right? And so, but on the left, when you see traditional systems, you had to do an amazing amount of customization in order to get SAP or Oracle or any of these platforms to actually do or fit your business, right? And on the right side, with all of these SaaS products in your landscape, most SaaS products don't let you customize, right? They allow some level of configuration, but then you sort of are forced into how they work and sort of use them. And so now you have a choice between using one SaaS product versus another. Now, so on the right side, there is that you lose some of this flexibility. On the left side, you have flexibility, but it's extremely, extremely expensive, right? And another big metric that I watch specifically is when I recommend my customers to buy a particular SaaS product, I look at what percentage of that product will they actually use. So if you, based on different surveys out there, typically businesses use less than 45% of most software that they buy, right? So they buy, if you buy a HubSpot or if you buy a Salesforce, you don't use all the features that they give you or that they charge you for. You use a portion of it, right? Now, so as we move from the left to right, what is that transition and how do we actually address? So how do we get ahead of this whole problem of, yes, we're going to have multiple SaaS products. We want to buy them simply because they're best in class. They solve the problem really well for your business, but then I got to implement 20 of these to get to what my business needs, right? So how do we do that? And that's sort of the root of our discussion today. And that's what we'll try and address, how we've solved it, and we'll walk through an example specifically. Okay. All right. So the last section, sort of to drive home this point about differentiation and the landscape, one of the things I like to always state is you cannot buy your way to differentiation, right? You cannot just buy Salesforce and say, look, I can service you better because we have Salesforce. 20,000 other customers or businesses can say the exact same thing, right? So how are you different? So how do you get around that? And so the important thing that you understand, that we all need to understand, is the customer experience and the employee experience, which is your cultural DNA. You cannot delegate that to your SaaS platforms that you buy. So you cannot just swipe a credit card, buy a SaaS product. I'm going to use that product, and now this is how my customers are going to experience our services. That's not a good way to differentiate. That's not a way to preserve some of the amazing customer experience and customer relationships that you've built. So just to drive home that point, you cannot be delegating that customer experience to your software products that you buy.
That's right.
Okay.
I would say too, Anand, with that, you can't, I think a lot of the time I've seen companies buy a piece of software and they adapt their operational process to fit the software they bought, when it should really be, you can differentiate in some cases with how you do things and your operational processes for what you do, whether that's a customer success thing and the touch points you're going to have with that customer that are going to be more hands-on than maybe one of your competitors. But then the question is, how does the technology you choose help you be even better at that than you would be doing it manually? So it's kind of, the process you have and your differentiation and the processes that result from that should be the things that drive which software you buy, because that software should be the best one that helps facilitate the things you want to do and the things you think are going to differentiate you. Oftentimes it happens the other way. Is my
Exactly. So that's a great segue into the solution part of it, right? So far we've talked about the problem, we've talked about why we think it is a problem, and we've hopefully convinced everyone that the idea behind the idea behind trying to solve for this is important, because going forward, we only see more and more of these really amazing SaaS products or specific niche products that solve very specific use cases coming out in the market. And that's great for innovation. That's great for our businesses. But how you use them really makes a difference, right? So going back to the build plus buy is what we have had success with, right? So there's this notion of buying, right? And everybody, even with the old world of SAP and Oracle, you got to buy, but then you got to customize everything to make it fit your business. With SaaS, you lose that I would say you lost that customization ability, and you're limited by the configurability of the software that you have. But that is changing dramatically in the last 2 to 3 years. That has changed significantly, right? And you'll see down in the next few minutes how Consero was way ahead of the times at that time, thinking about how do you actually solve this problem using this build plus buy strategy. And today it's a much more relevant strategy today, simply because there has been no better time with the availability of the software supply chain, where you have lots and lots of microservices out there, lots of APIs out there that you can tap. There are $1 billion+ companies that just work on APIs. If you look at Twilio, for example, if you want to send an SMS, all you need to do is call a Twilio API. If you want to send an email, you just call a MailChimp or a SendGrid API. You want to accept credit card payments, call a Stripe API, right? So if you look at the ecosystem of the software supply chain that's becoming available there, it's a tremendous opportunity for businesses to use this build and buy strategy, where they buy these amazing products or SaaS platforms that have solved the problem really well. And then you just build your differentiation, right? And I like this quote from Jeff Lawson, who's the founder of Twilio, for those who are familiar. So you most may or may not have heard of Twilio, but all the text messages that you get from all your apps, everything goes to Twilio through the Twilio infrastructure, right? And so if you look at it, they have, he says this all the time, looking at the different digital native startups, right? Like the Airbnbs of the world, Ubers of the world, they built their entire digital future. They did not really buy and plug solutions together and say, this is what I'm going to use my, this is how I'm going to run my business. But they actually spent the time and effort to build that differentiation layer powered by all of these other platforms in the backend, right? And this is the example that we'll specifically look at, where this is all not theory. This has been implemented successfully, and we'll look at it how Consero actually did this, right? So Consero's platform is called the SIMPL platform, finance as a service platform, and Bill will talk about it in a couple of minutes here, right? Just to wrap up that thought about what I mean by build plus buy, you have your software landscape that you use or that you need to run your business, and then you can buy all of those. There are tremendous products out there. Of course, you have to go through the process of vetting them, looking at the features, how they fit your business. It's a completely different, that's a topic for another webinar, but you have to go through a lot of deep dives and then make a decision. And once you make a decision, you run with it, right? And then what you can do is you can technically build a unification layer that sits on top of all of these software platforms and provides that customer experience platform, which is the layer, which is how your customers interact with your business digitally, right? The old ways of meeting people face to face, calling them, all that is slowly reducing, but customers are more and more experiencing your business through a digital form or a digital front, which is everything inside a browser, right? So which means, how do I make sure that interaction, right? When you present yourself to a customer physically, you would present yourself with your branding, with your logo, the way your team presents themselves. But how do you do the same thing with digitally? How do you present yourself digitally? And that's that customer experience platform where you can build. And oh, by the way, people who are helping you with that amazing customer experience, your employees, also don't have to log into 12 different systems and struggle with data fragmentation across your platform. So you would actually end up building some kind of an employee experience platform. And those two layers are the opportunities for you as a business to really become a digital first company that allows you to use what is available in the market, the best in class products that are available in the market, and overlay them with a customer experience platform and an employee experience platform, right? So this is what we mean when we say build plus buy. So you will buy these best of breed products out there, and then you will ensure that you are actually using these platforms to provide the customer experience and the employee experience through a unified layer. Okay. So Bill, you want to dive into this one?
Sure. I think you set the stage well on and summed up the problems and the constraints. We as a finance as a service company, and finance as a service really means we deliver all of the software and all of the services that have to happen to support a company's financial operations. That means things like processing and getting vendor bills paid. It means oftentimes billing for customers. It means applying cash as you receive it from customers to the receivables. It means closing the books every month and generating a financial package. But like I said, it also means bringing the software in that supports that, so the business doesn't have to go and figure out what applications they should be using and how to make and run an efficient finance accounting function. And so that's really what finance as a service is. And SIMPL for us, as it says here, really is a layer, a custom piece of software that we built that does exactly what Anand said. It sits on top of third-party applications as an engagement layer. And the objective is to simplify for the customer the interaction with the finance function. When we when we first started as a business, oftentimes we would plug into native applications that customers had, and we found we were solving the same problems over and over again with different sets of tools, and there was no efficient way to engage with the customer, which started us down the path of standardizing on tools and then adding SIMPL on top, and really allowing users to see the information that they need, not they have to go log into a big complicated piece of finance accounting software that might be overwhelming to them and isn't really built for non-finance accounting people. That's where we developed SIMPL.
I think that's the key. That is, how do you actually take your business and not make it user specific, that only certain people can understand what you're doing, but make it a little more generic, right? So that's important. So,
yep.
Yep.
So really SIMPL, the acronym of SIMPL comes from being able to see and understand how your business is from a financial standpoint today, how it's standing, being able to interact with the finance function to make sure you're not bottlenecking things that need to happen, and you're giving feedback and getting the outputs that you need as a business leader. And then monitoring the performance of the business over time, having trend information, being able to compare that to your plans and see if you're on track or off track with where you hoped you would be. And underneath that is then learning what's causing the changes in that performance, drilling down into information to really get the answers to why marketing spend went up, why did it go up? That's the thing that SIMPL also helps you be able to see, and again, in a much easier fashion than through traditional Excel files, ERP, system access, etc. It has a very narrow objective as an engagement layer for customers.
Yep. All right.
And I think Anand said it earlier, not only does it allow us to abstract complexity and present the customer with a simpler layer, but it really does allow us as a company to control and deliver exceptional customer experience. So if we, yeah, so we really had, as I mentioned earlier, we started saying we need to standardize on applications, not only our own internal operations, of course, but the how we deliver to the customer as a service provider. We need to be experts at these applications. We need to have out-of-the-box solutions to common problems that come up. We work a lot with software businesses. When a software business now opens a sales office in Europe, we should have an out-of-the-box answer for how are we going to support that new office now. Now we need multiple currency support. We need to consolidate financials. That same company could have a back-end office, R&D center in India. And so now you've got some additional complexity as a business, and we wanted to have out-of-the-box solutions to that, because those aren't unique things, right? Those are things that are common with software businesses. And so we knew we wanted to build out-of-the-box answers to those. And you only get that by having standardized underlying software that you use to deliver the services to your customers. So that's where we really started getting this standardized third-party application stack. And again, SIMPL sits on top, draws information out of all of those systems. For instance, someone can log into SIMPL and they can see their cash balance, which comes out of the accounting system, or in this case, Sage Intacct. They'd also be able to see if they have vendor bills they need to approve to move them ahead in the payment process. Well, that information comes out of bill.com. And so there's various things that they see where they don't have to go log into a bunch of different systems, all of which have different user interfaces, and all of which have different ways of presenting information, to the point where, to reinforce the value of the engagement layer, not just for your customers, but for your own business. We had cases where customers would log in and someone said, hey, what's wrong? I looked and my accounts receivable balance says 0. Someone made a mistake. Someone messed something up. Well, it turned out the customer was looking in bill.com. Small companies can do their receivables management in there. Well, we do it in Sage Intacct. Someone looking in the system, because they were going in, saw AR 0, and they don't know how we're using the applications to deliver the service. So all of a sudden, the customer had to be privy to the complexities and the how Consero was using it. And since we've launched SIMPL years ago, we don't have that anymore. They're not in there seeing the things that don't matter to them and that only add confusion and complexity. Now they see the information they need to see, and we don't have those things anymore. So
Yep.
that's kind of the simple thing. At the bottom there, we have the tech-enabled finance as a service team members. And I think that is important. There is, yes, Bill.com, for instance, has some great automation things to take manual steps out of a process that if you didn't have Bill.com, you would have a much more manual process. We found as a company, there were additional things we really wanted to automate that in the payables process that Bill.com didn't, or that between the systems, there were steps that we were taking as a company we wanted to do. And now we've been able to do, number one, our employees become tech enabled by using the leading third-party applications that we know fit our customer base. But secondarily, we also do custom automation and work to help them manage their workload better and allow them to be higher value employees and to produce more value for our customers.
Right. And this goes back to that whole discussion that I went through a few slides ago. Is most companies would use about 45% of, say, Sage Intacct, right? And there's all these other things. And when I say 45% is one company may use 45%, the other company may use another 45%, but then it's the same software. And so if adding an engagement layer such as SIMPL on top of multiple products simplifies and doesn't expose you to expose your customers to all those complexities underneath. But what you're doing is delivering this consistent customer experience over and over at the same time, right? It looks exactly the same. Their experience with Consero will be exactly the same thing. And again, I hate to use this analogy, but if you go to a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A, any location you go to, you're going to get the exact same thing because they follow that exact process. Their engagement layer is the same. If I know how to order at one location, I can order from any location, and that's across the world, right?
Well, and in fact, Anand, the thing I would add to that is we certainly saw when we started Consero that the landscape primarily in outsourced finance accounting was firms that were a consulting model. They give you a person who plugs into your QuickBooks file and does some actions and gives you some reports out of that, and they close the books at the end of the month. But it was a very person-driven business, and oftentimes their billing models reflect that with, hey, you need this many hours to support the business. And we looked at that, and it just didn't jive with when you go look at other more mature outsourced services. You look at payroll or PEO companies, they don't, oh, let us plug into your whatever HR software you have. No, that they actually give you that as part of their service. And now you as a company don't have to go figure out what HR infrastructure you need. And we've used PEOs for years. And when we got it implemented, 2 weeks later, our employees could log in and see their pay information and their withholdings and their benefits plans and all these things that in the past they had to go ask somebody for. And certainly we had, as a company, we had a vision of outsourced finance accounting, which we later term FaaS, being a managed service like what you get with a PEO business, where they're giving you a service per pay model, and you have software that allows you to be more efficient and effective without you having to figure it out. And that we knew we wanted to go down that path, and that there was a lot of opportunity there to do that and be differentiated from the folks who were, hey, here's our guy who's going to plug into your whatever system you have, which may or may not even be efficient and effective for your business.
Right. So with that, so exactly the way Bill articulated it, the systems at the bottom, you can swap them out, right? So as companies outgrow their systems, Consero backend team and the engineering team decide what's the best breed, what is the best product that can fit all these businesses, and they might swap these out, right? So Consero might swap out Sage Intacct for a NetSuite or a NetSuite for Sage, or vice versa, right? 6 months down the road, there may be this amazing new platform that comes that is significantly different than Bill.com. You never know. So, but what happens is with that engagement layer, the customer's experience with Consero is going to be exactly the same every time, right? And that consistency is what makes customers sticky. That's what makes the customer experience, customers to talk about the experience with Consero or your business, and that consistency is important, right?
And I think your point on, but it's not that it means you It's not plug and play. You pull something out, you put yes on the back end. Our teams need to know the new application, and there are some nuances and features of things. But to your point, from the customer standpoint, if we were to say we want a different expense management system on our back end, the customer's approval, that interface that they would have would look, it's going to be the same approval interface that they've had all along, regardless of what the back end system is. So it definitely reduces the impact and exposure, certainly to customers, and makes it easier for you to have some portability and ability to make changes as you grow. Whereas the customer.
So as businesses, you have to think about how you're impacting your customers, right? So it's that whole notion of, we at ThinkBridge have this idea of ThinkBridge effort index, right? That's what we use for customer satisfaction. It's a measure of how much effort does a customer have to put in to actually work with you. And if that index is high, it tells you that they have to jump through hoops to get you to get some service out of your business, which is not the best customer experience, right? So
yeah, and I think again on it, well, we can cover it on the next slide.
Right, sure, yeah. And so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like again, when we talked about SIMPL, right, it's having the right views for the right people of information, instead of here's what you have here, the hero who has the answers. We had a company we worked with, and when we were going through the sales process, they had referred to their finance person as the wizard in the box. And it was that anytime you need information, you go to the wizard and they get over their computer and go and produce something, and people go, oh, wow, thank goodness for so-and-so. Without them, we'd be stuck. Well, that's the problem. It shouldn't be that way, right? You should have more transparency in the business. And when people go, we don't know what we would do without Bob or without, Jane, it's because they are the wizard in the box. They're the holders and the accessors of the information. And the more you can have transparency and visibility and the right level of information, where a CFO is going to want to see more detailed financial information than some other executives on the team who might want more dashboards and KPIs than financial reports, or they want to see customer revenue and vendor spend details, but they don't care about a GAAP financial statement. So different roles in the company will want different levels of information, and we've been able, because we have our own layer there, we've been able to customize that and make sure people see what they need to see and want to see, not everything, and they got to go figure out how to see the pieces they wanted.
Right.
And then I talked a little earlier about what FaaS is, as far as an alternative to building out a building or getting an outsourced accounting service that plugs into your applications. A FaaS provider should bring you operational scalability. Again, I go back to the PEO version of that, right? We had much more scalable HR infrastructure when we leverage that provider than we would have with our spreadsheets on a shared drive somewhere. And what were we going to do? We were going to build out our own HR work, or go implement a much more complex system that would have taken us months to years to do, and instead in weeks we could plug into something that was already pre-built for companies like us. And so those are good examples of what we were doing here, but it's really starting with a standard software stack. We have workflows and automation. We've put custom ones we've done, along with using the full capabilities of the products we have in our stack, and then marrying that with a virtual professional finance and accounting support team. Again, experienced professionals, allowing them to focus as much of their time on the higher value activities and the trying to generate insights for the customer, not compilations of information. And then, as we talked about, we built our own proprietary engagement layer. And then what all of this together also helps us enable is really having a pay per service pricing model. We had evolved away from hourly thing that had never really been a thing, but we had a fixed fee billing model at one time when we first started. And the problem was, that's great, a customer knows what it costs today, but they always want to know what happens at the end of the year when I'm not 50 employees and employees. And there was a lot of hand waving and that depends on this and that. And really, as we've gone and had a pay per service model, now that's super transparent to the customer. They can plan, they know what things are going to cost them from a budgeting standpoint. And if their business gets smaller, they're paying less. If it gets bigger, they pay a little more, but they don't have to make all those step function decisions of hiring another person where you got the one level of spend and then all of a sudden you have to go here. We've made it much more of a slow variable increase versus step functions. And the software we have, the important part of that is consistency and service delivery, as you said, Anand. What are the things we know we can deliver consistently across our customers that are going to grow with their headcount? And we have to be able to do those in a consistent fashion to apply automation to them. And that's where, again, a lot of the traditional folks in the space, it was, here's a guy who's going to plug in and work in your QuickBooks, and then they get another customer and there was a different guy or gal who's going to plug in to that. How can those possibly be run the same way when it's just someone plugging into a third-party piece of software? And so we wanted to have scalability and consistency in service delivery for us to really scale the business.
Right. And I remember a use case where there was a new acquisition and they were using SAP and the other company was using NetSuite. And they couldn't really come together, right? Here we are. I just spoke to the CFO, and they're still 20 years later. They're still in two different systems and customers of both units have to interact with two different systems, even though they are, getting billed by the same entity. So it's that high friction customer experience versus the seamless experience that you can build on top of best of.
And I think it's important. One differentiator. A lot of the time when we go and we talk to folks about certainly what we do, and we talk about that we'll have them up and running in 30 to 60 days, depending on aspects of their business. We'll have people who will say, I don't believe that. I've never seen a software implementation that could go that fast. We've had ones that took years, certainly 9, 12, 18 months, and they run longer and there's misses along the way. But I think the thing people miss with that is, again, going to my PEO analogy, we were up and running in 3 weeks. Well, the PEO provider we work with, I believe they have an Oracle or an SAP back end, but that's not, they weren't implementing Oracle or SAP for us. They've already built the product and they're putting us, and their processes are already integrated with that software application. And all they're doing is they're putting you onto that platform. And it's the same for us. We've implemented the software already. Now we configure it for that customer. But we know, for instance, if someone needs purchase orders, they want to have purchase order process for large purchases in the business. With the application stack we use, there's 3 different ways you could do that. 3 of the tools we leverage all have the capability to do POs. And so as a company, you run into that for the first time, you're just going to look at it. You're going to try to do your best to vet it out and pick one of them. For us, we already know how we do it and things are going to come in. They're going to go into this queue. They're going to come out here. Here's the approvals that will happen. And there's no, we discovered there was this corner case that we didn't know about, because we've used that same functionality the same way with enough customers in this segment that we service that we know it's going to work, and it's set up like that, not an implementation.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that's a good segue into our next topic, which is in order to do everything that Bill is talking about and building this engagement layer and making decisions on what software to buy, the business also have to align their roles and the tools so that they're set up for success. So even though when they build this engagement layer, it's not like, just as Bill described, if there's a new process, the backend team or your business has to go and implement those and sort of abstract those complexities, but you don't expose all of that to your clients because your engagement layer is still seamless, right? So the way we like to look at this is we have the visionary. In your typical business, you have the visionary who identifies the opportunities, and then you have the pragmatists who actually know they're not in that visionary stage. They know how to take that vision and convert it to what is required. And then you have the people who make things happen. And if you look at these 3 different people, types of people in an organization that use, the tools that is required, the connections that are required to bring all these platforms together, and then the servers and infrastructure that's required, all of these things are necessary that you do within a business in order to enable that engagement layer. And what you're doing is within your organization, you have to have all these roles and tools in order to build that engagement layer on top of other capabilities within your organization. So we try to make it as generic as possible, but the intention here is to explain to everyone that there is work to be done, but different kind of work in order to enable that engagement layer, right? And then similarly, just like finance as a service, you can decide to build the whole thing in-house, just like Bill said. And then, or you can buy the infrastructure that you want, or you can buy the platform on which you can build the infrastructure, right? Or you can buy the software itself, which is what most people do, which is people buy SaaS all the time. But then where everything is going towards in the future is this whole notion of technology as a service, right? So if you look at finance as a service, it's a bunch of technology which is being delivered through that engagement layer, but it's enabled by people who are finance domain experts who are delivering that. So that's the technology as a service. So now if you replace that finance domain with some other domain, again, you're delivering things through the technology and allowing that customer experience to experience your services through a digital medium, through a technology, but you swap out depending on what services you're offering, you swap out the domains beneath what you're offering, right? And so to wrap this up and leave a few minutes for questions, here are the 3 takeaways or the intention behind why we thought this was an important topic to discuss. Is just buying technology does not just result in differentiation, right? So just because you bought a piece of technology or a whole bunch of technologies, you can't claim to be a good business because you did that, because now you're relying on that SaaS vendor, right? The other thing is, do not delegate your culture, your customer experience and employee experience to the software platform that you're buying. So people are experiencing that software platform versus your business and what you have to offer. If you tell customers, use Slack, they love Slack, right? They wouldn't really love what you're doing, but you can use Slack for some other purpose, but you have to figure out how to deliver your business and deliver that customer experience that you really have built as part of your business. And lastly, the way to future-proof your business is to start thinking about, just like Jeff Lawson said, there's this really good book that he's written called Ask Your Developer. It's a really good proof point on why this is the future, right? Because of the API economy, because of the microservices architecture, because of the software supply chain, you have to start thinking about how to future-proof your business through this build and buy strategy, instead of just relying on simply buying SaaS products and filling them up in your business and then struggling through that, right? So those are sort of the 3 takeaways that we have from this particular discussion topic. So we will make this slide deck available for anyone who wants it, but there's more information online if you'd like to learn more, and we can go into questions next. All right, so Bridget, I have all the questions here, so I'm going to just read them out and attempt to answer them.
Wonderful. And we do have a guest that is with us today who actually did see Bill speak at Private Equity International last week,
okay.
A guest who attended one of those panel discussions that
Nice.
Bill presented on. And so his question is, what is the biggest value that clients get from Consero's finance as a service model?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll put it into two buckets because I think they are 2 different things, right? And number one is typically when we engage with a company, obviously, as Bridget said, we were at Private Equity International. We work with a lot of private equity firms, and especially the scenario where you have private equity firms who are first institutional capital in a business. And oftentimes founder run, family run business, they don't use their financial information to make decisions. They don't really value it that much. A lot of things are in the head. And so hence all the accounting system in those cases is used for a lot of the times is to give their CPA a set of books to do their taxes at the end of the year. And so when they get institutional capital, now all of that changes, right? They have investor reporting and bank reporting, and they need a financial audit every year, and they need plans and reporting of, results against that plan. And so when all of that changes, the process to go get that to work is time consuming. You have to hope you hire the right CFO. Oftentimes the people at those companies aren't what you would want for the same levels at an institutionally backed business. And so you have people and process and systems things that all need to change. We can do all of that in a dramatically shorter timeline than them hiring the CFO, who then goes out and builds out a team and then picks out a piece of software, and then a year later bolts on an expense management tool or something else. And that whole process just drags out because you've got the two parts to the job of the builders and the maintainers, and you're munging it into one thing there. Whereas we have very distinct things. The builders set everything up and configure everything for us, and then the maintainers are the ones who run the operations every month using that platform and configuration that was built. So that time to optimized finance accounting is one of the biggest ones for us, and the cost of that. And then on the ongoing basis, it's the transparency and allowing people to see things real time and not have the hero or the wizard in the box controlling information. It's that people can log in, they can see things. I always say, imagine if you still had to call your bank to get your bank balance, right? You shouldn't have to ask somebody what your cash position is. That should be something you can see very easily in your software. But a lot of companies at that stage, they don't have that. And so I would say it's that combination, the upfront time and timeline and cost to get to optimized structure, and then having the transparency and visibility on the back end to facilitate more informed, fast decision making for the business.
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, I have a few more questions here, Bridget. So I'm going to go through a couple of these which I think are important. Do you have any more on your list?
That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. So this question I think is very important. We have about 5 minutes, but I think we can cover it. So how do you know how much to actually build versus buy when it comes to technology, right? This is a great question, and this is the whole premise behind what we talked about, right? Which is a very simple answer is build your differentiators, buy your systems of record, which people have already innovated, people have already invested. You're not going to innovate, right? So for example, if you need if you need to accept credit cards for your business, go with a Stripe or Square or any of these other companies. They have an API, plug and play. It works seamlessly. So you wouldn't build any of that because it's not easy to build. It's not, and you wouldn't even think of building that. But the way customers pay for your business and the way you present your products to your customers is different, right? So build that. So your e-commerce interface, if you use Shopify or anything else, again, I'm just giving you an example, how customers buy your services is where you would innovate. And so the foundational element of that is to really think hard about how is your business different and how do you differentiate between another person who says, I can do the same thing too, right? And so that thought process, you have to really think about what is your differentiator and then decide to build that, because that's what you would build, because nobody else can actually do what you do. So you would digitize that and you would buy what's already best in class out there. So that's my answer. And I'll be happy to chat about it a little more over email or whenever we get a second chance. So that's my answer to that question. The other question that I have is, what mistakes do companies make while making spending decisions on technology investments? So I'll answer this and I'll let Bill chime in. The biggest mistakes that I've seen is going with what somebody from sales or marketing tells you, right? Or looking at online and say, somebody shows up and says, look, use this product, it's great for you. I think you should have a very disciplined, cohesive approach about thinking about every software you are going to use, because once you start using software, you're not going to stop, right? Software is never ending. The best kind of software is no software, right? The best kind of technology is no technology, because once you have technology, you are going to continue to spend time and effort with it. So the best way is to look at the software and explore, lay out your problem statement, identify 3 or 4 options, deep dive into each one of those, and then make a decision instead of just listening to somebody, some post on, again, I'm not saying people do this, but I've seen people make these decisions. Just, oh, there's a lot of chatter about this particular product and they just raised, $200 million. So they have some credibility. I'm just going to go with them. So Crunchbase is a good source, but that's just because they raised a round doesn't mean they're a fit for you. So you got to have those decision criteria that helps you make those decisions. So we are exactly at 2 p.m. Eastern. So I think we're at the end of the session. I'll be happy to address, I should have your information here, and we'll reach out to the rest of you for all the questions that were posted. And again, thank you for your time. And hopefully this was a useful session. Please send us your feedback so we can adjust or course correct for the next session. Bill, any closing thoughts?
No, I think you hit on it pretty well, Anand.
All right, great. With that, we will be ending today's webinar. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks, everybody.